What is some advice that you could give to someone if, for example, they want to start traveling the world? I guess you need to put together a plan, but in your experience, what's the best way to go about doing this?
Yeah, I tend to go to places and arrange tours. As again, I organize and lead tours that are small groups. But people often ask, why do you go to these specific places? And they're usually places that I want to go, that I have an interest in. And I'm a fairly normal person, so if I have an interest, I've got to think that other people do as well, and they're not too crazy or off the beaten path. But um, so obviously figure out what's a place that you've always wanted to go to, what's interests you. A lot of people have bucket lists and things nowadays, but so figuring out where that is, what the best time of year to go is, and that's not always the high season. For me, it's almost never the high season to go, because that's usually when it's more expensive, more crowded, things like that. Oftentimes hotter in places like Europe. For me, I like to go in that shoulder season, spring and fall, whatever hemisphere you're in, and you just get cooler weather, less crowds. Things are less expensive. You get a little bit more of a sort of a locals experience, I'll call it. And so planning, it's great if you can be spontaneous and just say, you know what, I'm going to look online, and there's websites that will tell you where the cheap flights are this week. And if you can jump on something like that pretty quick and just go, I admire you.
Yeah.
I never seem to have that luxury of doing that, but I also am a planner, so I like to know where I'm going. I'm a little bit older nowadays, so when I was younger, it was I'll show up and find a place when I get there. And now it's like, I want to know that I've got a place that I'm going to be sleeping the first couple nights, where it's going to be, what it's like. And so I will do that research. So it just depends what kind of traveler you are, what your budget is, where you want to go, what kind of experiences you want to have. But one of the main tips I could give you is to hire a local guide. Hire
Right.
someone in the place that, especially that first day or two, that can take you out for an orientation walk, introduce you to the highlights, a little bit of the language, depending on where you are, the food. And that'll, number one, make you feel a lot more comfortable than, experiencing it the rest of the time on your own, maybe. But it can be very inexpensive to do that. So sometimes we think that that must be expensive to hire a guide, but depending on where you go, you can hire a guide, sometimes including a car that might, maybe they'll take you outside of the city, or maybe even from city to city. And you're almost surely going to have to pay for any expenses like hotel and things like that. But for a car, you can sometimes get a guide. And there are licensed guides and non-licensed guides, and there's pros and cons to that as well. I prefer the licensed guides for sure, but and that could be $50 to $75, including the driver, who is usually the guide themselves. But hire a local guide. You'll feel so much more comfortable. You'll get that history and a little overview of the place, and then you'll feel a lot more comfortable tackling it on your own for the rest of the time that you're there.
Okay. Hey, but in all seriousness though, guys, I'm bringing multiple options to the table. That's right, multiple options. And if you're on one of these, you're going to see a card in the top right to watch the full episode of this clip. But if you're on one of these guys, a laptop or a PC or something of the kind, then you're going to see a thumbnail that's going to come up right about now. So why don't you watch the full episode? Click on that. Don't forget to subscribe. Tell your friends and family. And lastly, sending you peace and strength. Let's go.